All right, y'all. We on the man, Mr. Nightmare. This video is three very creepy, true rest area horror stories. We ain't gonna waste no time. We're just gonna go right into it. Let's go. Story one.
When I was in my mid-20s, my girlfriend at the time took a job in Florida. The job was a contracted job where she would be employed for 6 months. Unfortunately, she needed to move to Florida for that 6-month window. Since I had a job here and we didn't want to break up, we decided to try the long-distance thing. From my doorstep, her apartment in Florida was 12 hours and 3 minutes away. I made the drive several times over the course of her job. I honestly didn't mind driving. I would usually take Friday off, leave at 5 a.m., and spend the day driving. I would usually arrive in the evening, and then I would have all day on Saturday with her. The only issue with leaving early was that I would constantly get caught in heavy traffic, and that was always the worst. The last time I went to visit her before she moved back, I decided that I was going to leave Thursday after work and drive overnight. My logic was that the traffic would be far less annoying overnight. Early in my drive, I was convinced that I had made the correct decision. I ran into some heavy traffic at the beginning of my drive, but once the sun went down, traffic died right out. Once it hit 11 p.m., the traffic was almost non-existent. I was making excellent time on my drive. I don't remember the exact time, but it was at some point in the middle of the night. I could feel myself getting tired. That's the curse of working all day and then trying to drive for 12 hours. It got to the point where I became so tired that I started to doze off a little bit while I was driving. I was doing the classic head drop. It felt like keeping my eyes open was the hardest thing in the world. I felt like luck was on my side for once in my life because I had just passed a sign for a rest area in 2 miles. I just needed to make it 2 more miles and then I could get out of the car, stretch, and splash some water in my face. I barely made it without crashing, but I finally pulled into the rest stop. It wasn't one of those nice ones that had food and gas. This was one step away from being an outhouse. It was a small brick building with one big open door in the front. When you walked through the open door, you entered a small hallway with a bathroom on the left and a bathroom on the right. When I parked the car, I didn't walk to the bathroom right away. At first, I got out of the car and started to stretch and do some jumping jacks. While I was stretching, I noticed one other car on the far side of the parking lot. I couldn't tell if the car was empty or if someone was inside the vehicle trying to sleep. Either way, it was a rest stop, so I wasn't concerned about another car. A few minutes had passed, and I made my way to the men's room. I was surprised to find that the door was locked. It wasn't like these were single toilet bathrooms, so I found it a little weird, but I didn't give it much thought after that. Since it wasn't an emergency that I used the bathroom, I walked back to my car and continued to stretch and walk around a bit. Roughly 10 minutes later, nobody had come out of the bathroom yet. I decided I was going to knock on the door and see if anyone responded. First, I tried to open the door again. I thought maybe I missed them walk out of the bathroom, as unlikely as that was since I didn't leave the area, but the door was still locked. I knocked several times on the door. There was no response. There was no sound at all. Since the rest stop was mostly empty except for that one other car, I decided to check the women's bathroom. When I attempted to open the door, it was unlocked. Before I continued to barge in, I started to tap on the door and ask if anyone was in there. Nobody answered. I entered the women's bathroom and I locked the door just in case someone showed up to the rest stop while I was in the bathroom. I didn't want them to think I was some creep in the middle of the night. I already felt weird being in the women's room, even when there wasn't another person around. I quickly used the bathroom, washed my hands, and then started to wash my face. While I was doing that, I thought I heard something at the door, so I turned the sink off. A second later, I heard it again. It was a light tap on the bathroom door. I was slightly embarrassed because I knew I would have to encounter whoever this was outside the women's room. I told the person tapping that I was sorry and that I would be out in 1 second. The tapping stopped for a moment, and then they started to beat on the door. I mean like aggressive slams into the door. I was nervous to open it. It wasn't just 1 or 2 hard knocks, but a continuous beat on the door. When they stopped, I walked over to the door and waited for a second to see if they would start knocking again. They didn't. I couldn't hear anything coming from the other side of the door. A few seconds later, I opened the door expecting to see an angry woman or some man about to beat me up for using the women's room, but nobody was there. I took a step out of the bathroom, and I noticed that the men's room across the hall was now open. The door wasn't wide open, but it was propped slightly open with something under the door. I also noticed that there was a trail of muddy footprints from the men's room to the women's room door, which was where I was standing. I was sketched out, but just happy to finally leave. All this tense anxiety with the bathroom had me feeling a lot more awake than when I pulled into the rest stop area. That happiness to leave didn't last very long. As I walked out of the hall, I noticed that there was now a car parked directly next to mine. It was the same car that had been parked on the far side of the lot when I pulled in. At a quick glance, I didn't see a person, but I did notice the muddy footprints leading from the bathrooms to the passenger side of my car, which would also be the driver's side of their vehicle. If it wasn't for the knocking on the bathroom door, I probably would have just kept walking my car, but something felt off. I decided to turn around and walk into the men's room, and I went into a stall to try and rationalize what was happening and just compose myself. I tried telling myself that even though all of this was weird and definitely a bit unsettling, it must just be a coincidence, a product of me being overtired and in a sketchy rest area in the middle of nowhere with one other person. I was trying to tell myself that I wasn't in any real danger. While I was sitting in the stall giving myself the mental pep talk, the men's room door squeaked open slowly. When I ran into the bathroom, I was so anxious that I forgot to lock the door behind me, and I heard whoever it was lock the door behind them. I was actually shaking at this point. Whoever this person was slowly walked through the bathroom until they got to the stall next to mine. They went into the stall and shut the door. I could tell he was just standing there because I could see the tips of his boots from the bottom of the stall. He wasn't facing the toilet. He was facing the wall separating my stall from his. I thought about saying something, but instead I just did my best to stay quiet. This had to have been the most uncomfortable 30 seconds of my life. This person didn't move an inch and just stood on the other side of the stall. I didn't want to wait for the person to act. I slowly opened my stall door, trying to keep the squeak of the door as quiet as possible. Once it was open enough, I ran out of the stall and to the bathroom door. Thankfully, the lock on the door was just a normal deadbolt knob. I unlocked it and ran to my car. While I was making the short run, I saw muddy footprints all around my driver's side door. These footprints weren't on the driver's side when I went into the men's room. They were only on the passenger side. I unlocked the door and got inside. As I was reversing out of the parking spot as fast as I could, I saw a glimpse of a tall man in a green hooded sweatshirt run out from the restroom hallway. I drove off as fast as I could handle without crashing. I initially saw the headlights pulling out of the rest area behind me, so I decided to floor it. I was going almost 90 miles per hour. When I looked back, I didn't see any headlights following me. For the rest of the trip, I was on edge. I'm not that great at identifying car makes and models, so I wasn't sure exactly what kind of vehicle this person was driving. All I was able to say for sure was that it was a navy blue Chevy, which is a very common vehicle here in the US. Every navy blue Chevy for the rest of my trip made my heart feel like it was going to burst out of my chest. Thankfully, I never encountered this man again. At least, I don't think I ever did. The entire encounter bothers me because I have no idea what that guy wanted. Part of me thinks he was some unwell man who just wanted to mess with me. If he wanted to hurt me or rob me, I feel like he had several golden opportunities to do it. To this day, every time I pull into a rest stop when I'm driving a long distance, I think about that guy. If I only see one vehicle at a rest stop, then you better believe I won't be stopping there anymore.
Story 2.
Last year, my family and I went on a vacation cross-country. Since we could afford the time off, we decided that we were going to drive and see a bunch of sights along the way. Something happened on the trip that still freaks me out. I'll do my best to break it down and write the story. But please remember that I've been out of high school for 15 years and I haven't written basically anything since then. Most of the trip was great. On the way back home, I decided to drive through the night and let my family sleep. It was my wife Jules, my 2 younger daughters, and our dog Bilbo. We got gas around midnight, and I made sure everyone used the bathroom before hitting the road. Well, I'm the fool that didn't listen to his own advice. I was so focused on getting gas and making sure my daughters used the bathroom, I forgot to use the bathroom myself. A little after 3 a.m., I was completely uncomfortable because of how bad I had to go to the bathroom. I'll try and spare you the details. Everyone in the car was sleeping. I contemplated just pulling over and going on the side of the road. Without being super gross, it wouldn't be as easy as just finding a tree to stand over, if you get my drift. During my struggles, I noticed a sign for a rest stop in 5 miles. I figured I could definitely make it 5 more miles. I will say that it was the longest 5 miles of my life, but I made it. I pulled up near the front of the bathrooms. I got out of the car and noticed this strange man staring at me with a strange expression on his face. He was sitting on a bench outside the entrance of the bathrooms. I wasn't super comfortable with leaving my family alone in the vehicle, but I literally couldn't hold it any longer. I made sure the door was locked, and I basically ran to the men's room. While I was running to the bathroom, the man on the bench turned his head and followed me with his eyes the entire time. It was super weird, but I had to go to the bathroom so bad I didn't care. When I was in the bathroom, I noticed a peculiar smell. Not your typical gross public bathroom smell. This was more of a strange smell than a gross one. It was almost like the smell of an electrical fire, but just a little different. I tried ignoring the smell since it wasn't my problem. While I was finishing up in the stall, the lights turned off in the bathroom. I started waving my hand around, thinking they were motion detecting lights, but it stayed dark. I reached for my phone to use the flashlight, but of course, my phone was still in the vehicle. I was fumbling around in the pitch black bathroom when a faint light came from the side of the room. The door had opened for a moment, then shut, and I was pretty sure someone entered the restroom. I was able to confirm that someone was standing there because I could hear heavy breathing. I also figured that the restroom must not have motion lights because they didn't turn on when this person walked in, meaning whoever they were, they must have intentionally turned the lights off for some insane reason. I tried not to make a noise, just in case this person was dangerous. It didn't sound like they moved from the door. That was still where I heard the breathing coming from. As quietly as I could, I finished my business in pure darkness and got ready to leave the restroom. I wanted to wash my hands, but I thought it was more important to make sure my family and I were safe. I slowly opened the stall door. I was ready to run over whoever was breathing like an animal in the darkness. As I left the stall, the lights turned back on, and to my surprise, nobody was standing there. I even took a quick look at the other stalls, and every other door was open. I was still alone. Complete darkness has a way of tricking your mind into thinking something is there when it isn't. Once I realized I was alone, I went over to the sink and started to wash my hands. That weird smell was starting to get overwhelming. I couldn't wait to just get back to my family. I was leaning over the sink washing my hands, and when I stood straight again, standing behind me in the mirror was the weird guy from outside. I almost just punched him out of instinct. He literally came out of nowhere. I didn't hear him enter or walk up behind me. I asked him what his problem was, sneaking up on me and standing directly behind me like that. He just kept looking at me with that vacant look in his eyes. He was bald and likely 50. He almost looked like he was from another time. He was dressed in a button-up shirt and a pair of plaid dress pants, but it looked like something my grandpa would wear. It just looked like very old clothing. Something was off about this guy. After I asked what his problem was, he just stood there and continued looking at me. I didn't want to wait another second and find out what this freak wanted. I moved to the side and headed for the exit of the bathroom. He didn't try to stop me, but he did turn his body and continued to watch me as I walked away. When I got to the door, before I exited the bathroom, the man said in a voice that sounded like he was straining to speak, "It's good to see you again."
What?
I just waved and stormed out of the bathroom. It was obvious to me this man was unwell. When I got outside, my family was still nestled safely and asleep in the truck. I should have just driven off as fast as I could, but since I didn't think this guy was a real danger, I decided to try and let the dog go to the bathroom before hitting the road again. He loved being outside, but as soon as I got him on his leash and out of the truck, he started to go crazy. He was barking and acting completely erratic. I had never seen this type of behavior from him, Ever. Not even as a puppy. I was trying to get control of him, and somehow he broke out of his leash and sprinted toward the bathroom door. I didn't know what was going on. I ran after him as fast as I could. He was digging at the bottom of the men's room door, trying to get it open. I was able to rehook his leash. I tried getting him back to the truck, but he wasn't having it. Something in that bathroom was setting him off. He wasn't just barking either. In between the barking and growling, he would whimper. I finally picked him up and carried him back to the truck. As soon as he was inside the truck with the door shut, he was fine. He stopped barking and looked at me with those loving eyes. I was just about to leave when I had a horrible thought. What if something had happened to that guy in the bathroom? I remember the smell, and this guy didn't exactly look like he was in the right state of mind. What if my dog was trying to get me to rescue him? I ran back to the bathroom, kicked open the door, and asked if he was okay. But there was no response. I was about to enter the bathroom again to check the stalls, but I had the worst feeling come over me. Something didn't feel right. From the doorway, I did my best to scan the room. I even got down on one knee to see if I could see this man lying on the floor of one of the stalls. Nobody was inside this bathroom. The strangest thing was that I never saw this man leave the bathroom. I guess he could have in the few minutes my back was turned when I was grabbing the dog, but I feel like I would have seen or heard him. I ran back to the truck. My family was still safe and sleeping. Bilbo was already snoring as well. That's when I noticed there wasn't another vehicle at the rest stop. This strange man was just there. It was almost like he was waiting for me. Thankfully, that's where the story ends. I have no answers for anything that happened. Ordinarily, I wouldn't even share a story like this, but it just felt so weird and uncanny that all of these strange things happened. It took a good hour and a half after I left the rest stop for that terrible pit in my stomach to go away. I don't know where that strange man came from, and more disturbingly, I have no idea where he disappeared to. I'm just happy my family remained safe throughout this entire unexplainable stop.
Story 3.
Loneliness can make someone make some stupid choices. In my case, an entire series of stupid choices that almost led to something I don't even want to think about. I'm a socially awkward person. I'm extremely introverted by nature. If you're like me and were trying to date in 2020, then I'm sure you remember the nightmare that came along with that. The world was a mess. I worked from home before everything shut down, so that was nothing new to me. But for some reason, being alone during that time felt so much worse for me mentally. I don't know why it took a global shutdown for me to want to date, but it did. I decided now was as good a time as any to try all these dating apps that people talk about. The idea of starting a conversation and breaking the ice behind the curtain of the internet was a gift for me. I could show the other person who I am first without my shy and awkward nature taking over. Well, my dating success was going about as well as conditions throughout the world. I wasn't getting very many matches on any of the platforms. I was even that guy who looked up online how to successfully set up a dating profile, and it still wasn't working. On the rare occasion I would get a match, the conversation would instantly fizzle out. The loneliness and depression were starting to take over. I was about to give up on dating and just live my life in misery, and then I got a match on Tinder. Her name was Bianca. Just glancing at her photos, she was stunning. But it wasn't just the photos. It was her bio that made me hooked. It was almost like her Tinder bio was written for me. She was into comic books, movies, reading, science, and basically everything else I liked. She liked it as well. I thought about my response for a while because I wanted to make sure I didn't scare this woman away. I led with a stupid joke, and almost instantly she responded with a lot of enthusiasm. By that, I mean she had smiley faces and a bunch of exclamation points. The conversation started going well. We were talking about comic books, and she told me her favorite superhero was Batman, just like me. I told her I had a Batman tattoo, and she told me she did as well. When I called her out on it, she uploaded a picture of the Batman symbol on her triceps onto her Tinder profile, which is the exact spot my Batman tattoo is located. It was around this time that my brain started to yell at me that this was too good to be true. AI slop and all that wasn't relevant at this time, so I wasn't worried about that, but catfishing was still a huge problem. Especially for lonely, depressed, awkward dudes like me. There was no way this woman was this perfect. I started to think that I was talking to a 49-year-old man sitting in his mom's basement. I continued messaging her on the app, trying to figure out how I could prove this woman isn't fake. She then suggested we exchange numbers so we could text without using the app. This is when I started to think that this woman is a fake, and now she's going to ask for money or something. But nope, she was still just Bianca when we were texting. The only thing I could think of doing to prove she was real was to ask her to FaceTime me. Just talking on the phone is enough to give me crippling anxiety, but FaceTiming someone was something else completely. I got myself pumped up and then worked up the courage to ask her to FaceTime. I was trying to think of an excuse in case she asked, but she didn't. She just agreed to FaceTime with me, no questions asked. When the call went through, I felt so many emotions. I was nervous to be speaking with this beautiful woman, but overjoyed that she was real. I was actually speaking with a real human. This was the woman in the photos. She wasn't an old dude or anyone else catfishing me. It was just Bianca. She was amazing. She must have known I was nervous. She had such a way with words. She was able to calm me down, and we ended up speaking for 2 hours on the FaceTime call. When I asked to see her in person, she got quiet and sounded sad. She told me that she was leaving this area tomorrow to go back to Tennessee, which was where she was from. She told me that she was on Tinder while she was visiting to maybe meet some interesting people. She told me that she didn't think she'd meet anyone as amazing as me. Those were her words, not mine. I asked if I could see her before she left, and she told me she was leaving at 6 in the morning, so there wasn't any time. I was upset. I felt like I finally connected with someone, and she was being ripped away from me. And she told me she had a crazy idea if I was up for it. At this point, she could ask me to rob a bank, and I probably would have agreed. She said there was a rest stop off the highway about an hour from this location. She suggested that maybe we meet there now, spend a few hours together, and then she could still hit the road early. I agreed instantly and asked for the exact rest stop location. Because of my weak and fragile state of mind, it didn't dawn on me once to ask her to come over to my place or meet anywhere in town. She asked me to meet her, and that's all I needed to hear. We hung up the call, I got ready, and started my trip to the rest stop. I texted her and told her I was on my way. She responded by saying that she was also on her way and sent a picture of her blowing me a kiss. She was behind the steering wheel in the picture. It took a little over an hour to get to the rest stop. There were no other cars at the rest stop, but I still parked near the back just in case she wanted more privacy. I waited around 5 minutes, and then I texted her and told her I was there. She responded by saying she was there as well. From the inside of my car, I looked all around, but I didn't see her car. Then I got out of my car and started walking around the small building that basically just had 2 bathrooms, a couple of vending machines, and some travel brochures. I didn't see any other signs of human life anywhere. I texted her again and asked exactly where she was, and she told me that she was parked behind the rest stop. She told me that there were a couple of parking spots back there, probably for maintenance workers. It was dark and much more private back there. Before I responded, she sent another message that said, "You should just keep walking behind the building and join me." Something finally started to click in my head. It wasn't blaring alarm bells, but something felt weird. I never told her that I got out of my car, so she shouldn't have known I was walking. But I ended up convincing myself that it was just me overthinking. As I started making my way around the building, I noticed that there weren't really any paths to get back there. Each side of the building was covered with heavy bushes and trees. There for sure weren't any roads that led back there. I'm an idiot though, and I started to push through all the bushes to get to the back of the building anyway. I was about halfway to the back of the building when I realized this was crazy. I was struggling to walk through all the bushes. There was no way she was behind the building. I decided to turn back and go into the building. I was standing in the lobby at the rest stop, and I texted her. I told her that I couldn't find the path to get behind the building and that she should join me inside. There were a couple of benches inside, so I told her we could sit on one and talk. My worst fear at that time was starting to come true. A few minutes had passed and she didn't respond. I was getting ready to text her again when she responded with just the word, no. I asked her what she meant, and she told me that it wasn't private enough in the lobby and we needed to meet in the back if we truly wanted some privacy. My brain and my heart were having an intense battle. My brain told me to get into the car and leave, but my heart was whipped. We texted back and forth for a little while longer, trying to figure out what to do. Well, actually, it was basically just her trying to convince me to go to her. It felt like she was getting annoyed. Then she stopped texting again. I waited a few minutes and then sent her another text. No response again. I decided I was going to try to call her and talk this out without texting. As soon as the call went through, I heard what sounded like a ringtone jingle coming from the back corner of the building I was in. It was only for a second, and then I didn't hear anything. At the same time, the call stopped ringing and went to voicemail. For a split second, I thought maybe she caved in and she was joining me inside. I walked toward the direction of where I heard the ringtone, but I didn't see anyone. I tried calling Bianca again, but this time it went right to voicemail. I started walking closer to the back corner, which was where the vending machines were located. There was also another door next to the vending machines that could have led to the back of the building. When I was maybe 10 feet from the vending machine, I saw a faint shadow coming from the side of the machine, a separate shadow from the one the vending machine was making. I tried calling Bianca one last time, but it still went right to voicemail. I finally caught a whiff of potential foul play, and I quietly turned around and retreated to my car. As soon as I got into my car, Bianca texted me asking where I was going with a sad face emoji. I guess her phone was now magically turned on. I wasn't going to respond. From my spot in the back,
trolling you. She was the shadow.
I drove up near the front of the entrance with my car lights turned off. Since it was dark outside, but the lights were on inside the rest stop, I could clearly see inside the windows. I saw a tall, skinny figure emerge from behind the vending machine and pull out his cell phone. It looked like they were typing. Then a message came through from Bianca. All it said was, "Where did you go?" That tall figure, whoever it was not the Bianca I had been talking to all night. She was short and had a completely different body type than this person. I didn't respond. I kept my lights off and quietly made my way to the exit. Once I got back onto the highway, I turned my lights on and drove home. It was almost 20 minutes later when I got another text from Bianca that just said, "I guess I'll get you next time." I had a hard time trying to understand what that meant.
What?
I did eventually report this to the police, but so much time had passed that they couldn't really do anything. The phone number wasn't in service anymore. The police told me it was likely a setup to get robbed, but I didn't really have anything for them to steal, which makes me think whoever this was, their intentions might have been darker. Whoever Bianca and this tall figure are, I hope they aren't out there still terrorizing people. Come to think of it, that Batman tattoo she put on her Tinder profile was probably from Google Images. It still breaks me when I think about all the work they put into just getting me to trust this woman and lure me out there. At the end of the day, at least this story got me to become much more alert when it comes to meeting someone online, because you truly have no idea who you're dealing with.
Hey man, that just goes to show you that you got to be careful with using social media, bro. Especially using Tinder or whatever type of dating app. First of all, who still even uses Tinder in 2026? But anyways, that's the end of this video. Hope y'all enjoyed it. And with all that being said, I'll see y'all in the next one.